Hello and welcome to the Aquarius Podcast. I'm your host, Randy Reed. This episode of the Aquarius Podcast is sponsored by OASE. OASE is well known for their line of outdoor pond and water garden products and are now stepping into the indoor aquatics market. Their lineup includes products like the internal BioPlus filters and external Biomaster canister filters. Both lines of filtration offer models with heater integration to help you declutter your tank and show off your plants and fish. OASE also has a great selection of aquariums in their Biorb line. Their Biorb Cube aquarium actually won the award for Best Aquarium Product at the Super Zoo Trade Show. So check out these great products and more by clicking on the links in the show notes. Now, on to the interview. Today's date is Thursday, April 11th, 2019. My guest today is Ryan Kinney. Ryan is a Florida resident who has progressively become more involved with catching native and invasive fish in Florida. Ryan is starting to convert his fish room into a Florida species collection. He was also awesome enough to take Corey McElroy and I out for an impromptu day of fish collecting when we were back in Orlando a few weeks ago. Ryan also hosts a popular YouTube channel called Lucky Schmuck's Fish Cave. So Ryan, welcome to the Aquarius Podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me, Randy. Really happy to be here.
And I want to make sure that I pronounced it correctly for everyone to hear. It was Ryan Kinney. And I feel like as I was saying that through my bio, I might have choked on the Kinney part. So I want everybody to know it is Ryan Kinney.
Oh, I think you said it fine, man, but I appreciate it.
No problem, man. I feel like we hung out for one day. I feel like I have a friend in Florida now in you.
Hey, I appreciate that, man. I feel like I got a friend in Washington there. It was really fun to meet you and hang out with you guys and kind of just go to lunch together. I mean, obviously maybe we'll get into it, but we ended up, shopping at Walmart and just kind of goofing off and doing some really cool stuff.
We're starting out real highbrow, man. We're talking about shopping at Walmart. Everybody, this is a classy show here. Yeah, man. I mean, it's I say that, and it's just funny what the fish hobby does. It's traveling around, meeting people, opening your doors up to relative strangers, and it's all this common thread of, hey, I've got fish. You like fish? Come in my house and check them out, complete stranger. Like it's just funny.
Yeah, it really is pretty interesting. I say this to myself a lot lately, like, if I was thinking to myself, 4 or 5 years ago, Ryan, would you be doing this? I'd be like, there's no way. And I find myself in situations, a lot of them due to, the fish keeping hobby. And I say it a lot that, there's a lot of fish and, new fish and finding new species that interest me. But the people in the hobby and meeting the people is just, I think, an underappreciated aspect of the hobby and something that has really kept me in the hobby. It's not what drove me to the hobby. I didn't come here looking to find, other people per se, but it's definitely an awesome part of the hobby and what's kept me in it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's kind of a slight parallel to, you start a job somewhere and the people, they enjoy where they work, but they'll tell you, it's not necessarily the place that I work, it's the people that I work with kind of thing that keeps them there. And so I definitely agree with you on that there's just some really awesome people that participate and enjoy this hobby.
Yeah, I've been fortunate to meet a lot through, maybe we'll get into it, but I do a lot of stuff on the cheap, a lot of DIY stuff in my fish room. And I've had an opportunity to meet a lot of local people that kind of do the same. So we bonded over our, love and passion for fish, as well as, trying to find deals. And it's been really cool. Like I have a lot of guys now that I can call, my friends that were truly strangers that I met, on Craigslist, OfferUp, Let Go, through fish keeping, because of fish keeping.
It's like you almost need to start a DIY fish keeping club and then hold your meetings at a Home Depot, Ace Hardware, or a Lowe's. That feels like it needs to be a thing.
Yeah, I'm lucky enough that I have a Lowe's right by my house, so I have been frequenting there a lot ever since I, started construction on the fish room.
Man, anybody that is, home projects in general, but there's just something about the building of a fish room where you are going to make 3 trips to Lowe's, 3 trips to Home Depot. It's just inevitable. Like you're going to forget something, or the brand of something that you need is carried at Lowe's, but you forgot and you went to Home Depot, and it's just like you live there until your fish room is done. It's ridiculous.
Oh yeah, I definitely can relate to that. And there's a Home Depot not that much further, and I've literally been to both multiple times on the same day because certain ones will carry certain things, but it's definitely somewhere I'm all the time.
Yeah, and for me, that was something where if you need a certain part, like I was using to tap into my water line, PEX connectors and whatnot, and there were items that I could have got on Amazon for cheaper, but it's like when I had time to work in the fish room, I was willing to pay the premium and drive to actually go and pick up that item in the store, where I feel like with most other things in life, we're willing to just wait that day or two for Amazon Prime delivery, but it's like, nah, man, I'm building my fish room. I got to get this done.
No, I'm the same, man. I have Amazon Prime. I've had it for quite a few years, and I use it for, probably too much stuff. But when it comes time and, I got time available to, insulate the room or add on to the air, the air system, which I did recently, it's something, if I need it now, like you said, I'm going to pay a premium and I'm just going to run to the store and grab it instead of, even waiting a day or two that Amazon, may take.
Yep. And so let's go ahead and build out who Ryan Kinney is. So what are your earliest memories keeping fish?
Yeah, so early on, actually, I've always kept a lot of pets, but my first two pets ever, and these are not from my memory per se, but these are based on kind of what, my mom told me that I had as a kid. And these were two goldfish actually named Sunset and Set Sun. But those aren't
Sunset and Set Sun. That's great.
Yeah. So don't ask me why. These are two fish that I don't necessarily have a, recollection of, but this is just told to me as, these were the first two pets you ever had were these two goldfish that I named Set Sun and Sunset.
So I want to take a moment and let the audience know I know what you're doing right now, but you have two awesome dogs, and I heard them a little bit, and I think you're giving them some attention right now.
Yeah, my apologies, man. I was trying to do it on the down low, but
no, it's okay.
I had them in the room. I took them for a walk just a bit ago, and I thought they would, be fine, but they were, kind of barking. I have them in the room. They're barking, so I let them out real quick.
No worries. What's the big guy's name?
His name is Bo, and he's just
that's
a ball
right.
of energy, man.
Yeah, Bo is such an awesome dog, man.
He's like 80-plus pounds.
I loved hanging out with that guy. All right, so now that everybody knows what you were doing, and which is perfectly fine. I've had guests with barking dogs before. I think it adds a little something to the podcast.
All right, cool.
So you had Sunset and Set Sun. Those two they were gold. You said goldfish, right?
Goldfish, correct? Yeah.
Okay.
But beyond that, the first real tank I had, this is probably in middle school. Once again, I don't remember all the specifics, but it was like about a 20-gallon tank. It was something like a hang-on back filter, and I remember having a blue Grammy with the spots, a ball of shark, and I'm sure a bunch of other tetras and stuff. I don't remember it doing well. I remember a lot of fish dying and buying new fish frequently, and definitely not understanding kind of, the nitrogen cycle or anything I understand now, just like a lot of people, have went through when they were a kid, that same kind of experience. So I definitely had one of those tanks, like I said, in middle school. And then was kind of out of the fish game for a while, but definitely still kept, dogs and lots of other animals along the way.
Mm-hmm. And now, before we jump, before I kind of lead you into the next little topic, why don't you tell me about guinea pigs?
Yeah, so that was definitely one of the first, kind of like business hustles I had, as well as being one of the pets I kept along the way. And I actually bred guinea pigs. I bred guinea pigs and sold them back to the pet store. This was not something where I made a lot of money. This was going to be like the beginning of high school. I actually ended up buying a guinea pig from a store that happened to be pregnant. And then I realized, this happens, and then you can, sell them back to the store and, breed them again. And I think at one point I was up to something like 25 to 30 guinea pigs. I had them in, a bunch of cages. I had like a finished basement, and they were all hanging out down there. And it was just, it got out of hand really quick.
It's so funny to hear you talk about breeding guinea pigs, right, and trading them back to the store. And we can basically label that breeding for profit. And now we're starting to draw make that connection with all of the fish videos and posts and articles out there about breeding fish for profit. Guppies and red cherry shrimp, kind of that real classic formula. And it never really dawned on me that there's potentially a breeding for profit, if you will, in other parts of the pet space, if you will. And so to hear that you're just like, I got a pregnant female guinea pig, and then it just like morphed into some like crazy breeding for profit thing in your basement for you.
Yeah, pretty much. That's kind of what happened. And, I really wasn't thinking about it like that at the time, or, trying to make a ton of money out of it. And it wasn't until, I don't know, 25 years later now, in the last few years that I kind of been doing the same thing with, cherry shrimp. It's something that cherry shrimp and some snails that I will, breed for profit. Pretty common thing to do in the hobby.
And so was a lot of the money that you got from the guinea pigs, was it just going back to like buying bedding because you had so many of them and they're pooping and peeing that you're constantly changing out bedding?
Yeah, that's something that I don't think I was into the whole buying used on Craigslist as much back then. So those cages, I remember being 60 to $100 a pop. The bedding was expensive. Guinea pigs are, I always tell people they're the only animal that poops more than it eats. But it still eats a lot. I mean, they call it a pig. It eats a lot. So it was definitely not like a winning proposition. This is not some get rich quick scheme. It definitely wasn't even paying for itself, but it was just kind of that cool little thing. It was just doing it was pretty neat. It was just interesting.
I mean,
it was just something.
I mean, I definitely see at some point with two kids in my household having a guinea pig or two guinea pigs. My wife is, we see guinea pigs at the store and they're cute. Let's make it real practical. Like what's some practical advice, in like 1 minute that you can give to somebody that their kid at home wants them to go down the guinea pig route, and we're going to drop some guinea pig knowledge on them.
Yeah, they're a cool pet. I think if you have the time, if you're really going to, I guess this is much like any pet. If you really do your research and want a guinea pig, I think it's cool. I used to make little mazes for them on the ground and have them run through them, but you can easily stick it in a cage and just feed it, and it'll poop, it'll smell, it'll make a bunch of noise, and it'll get annoying and, kind of go by the wayside, just like, a dirty aquarium can. But my thing is, I think you should do some research, definitely, just like any other pet, but figure out ways to, some people put them on a leash, but figure out ways to kind of interact with your guinea pig and socialize it and make it, kind of more part of the family as opposed to sticking it in a cage, because once you do that, you don't interact with it, it's just going to, fall by the wayside, in my opinion.
Now, are guinea pigs like hamsters where they're, more nocturnal, yeah?
You know what? I don't remember them being necessarily nocturnal, to be honest, but I could be wrong.
Because I feel like the hamsters that we had growing up as kids would, they had to have been nocturnal because they only came out to run on their wheels and to eat as the sun started to set. And at nighttime, you'd wake up and your hamster was either chewing on his cage or running on his wheel. Somebody's probably pulling their hair out because they know, like, good hamster husbandry, like that's a sign of something. So I apologize. We didn't know any better. But I mean, yeah, do your research, find out if these things are, because I certainly know that with the hamsters that we had, they'd wake you up running on their wheels at nighttime.
Yeah, that makes sense. I remember that. I remember them burrowing in the bedding all day long, like, hamsters, and then being there at night. I remember with the guinea pigs, definitely, having some cage or some caves and stuff, some hides, but I don't recall, but like I said, definitely do research.
Yeah, all right, good advice. And so let's bring it back home to fish. So then, after guinea pigs, like, what's your next foray, or what's your foray back into the aquatic space?
Well, the foray back into the aquatic space kind of involves a tilapia thing, which was what my garage was kind of a tilapia breeding project before the current state it's in now. But I had been jonesing for a saltwater aquarium for a while. At my workplace, they had got a saltwater tank, and I just found myself, like, throughout the day just kind of glued to the tank all day long, just infatuated by the saltwater tank, to the point where I put together even a spreadsheet of kind of the saltwater 55-gallon Fowler tank, which maybe you saltwater geeks know out there, but kind of like fish with live rock, but no actual corals. And I had put this all planned together, and that was my goal, was to have a saltwater tank, and I wanted to jump back into fish. Well, that never happened, but my best friend reached out to me, and he had come into a cargo shipping container, like one of those huge shipping containers, and we were trying to figure out what we can do with it. and we decided that we would raise tilapia inside this shipping container.
How do you come to that though? How are two dudes that get a shipping container and the outcome is let's raise tilapia?
Well, we had always kind of one of our goals as a kid was to own a pet store. And, now after kind of seeing what owning a pet store or fish store entails and how much hard work goes into it, I love the hobby. I don't think owning a fish store or any kind of pet store is my goal anymore. But as a kid, that's something that, my best friend and I had talked about and dreamed about, and something that was always kind of in our minds. And so we knew we kind of liked the idea of fish and animals. He and his wife own a food truck, and they're constantly at events, and there's people that have like fish tacos and stuff like that. So our whole goal was to raise a home raised fish that was going to be raised on like duckweed and sustainably and very healthy, and we would be able to sell it to local food trucks and farmers markets and kind of more local restaurants, so they locally sourced kind of fish.
Okay, so now you're starting to you're starting to make a lot of sense, because I've seen some shows where they show the the farm and the farm to table, and they're raising the like pork. They're raising pigs in a very sustainable, rural, organic, down to earth kind of farm manner, and they get a premium for those pigs when they sell them back to very, very high end restaurants, because there is that farm to table movement, and the the yuppier the establishment, the more money you're going to get for those pigs. So I can now see the wheels are turning, right? Okay, now that we're starting to connect some lines, and that makes sense now.
This was definitely a business. This is definitely a business kind of decision. We were going into the tilapia not thinking, oh, we love tilapia, this will be cool. This was definitely like a business-minded thing where, hey, we have this shipping container, we have this kind of love for tilapia, maybe there's this opportunity here. But the whole shipping container thing didn't make sense. It was on, a property that wasn't that close, but I had a garage, and we're like, hey, we can do this in my garage. So that's what we did. I mean, we went out and we drove like an hour and a half, 2 hours away to this guy who sold us this breeding pair of tilapia. And literally within like 2 weeks, we had, 5 or 6 pregnant tilapia, and then like hundreds of babies, like hundreds and hundreds of babies. Breeding them was not the easy part. They're like, people joke about like guppies and stuff like that. It was pretty much like that. Where the wheels fell off was just the sheer volume of it. At this point, I still didn't know anything about a nitrogen cycle. This is where I started doing some DIY stuff, and what kind of, just kind of inspired me to really do what I do now in the fish room, but this is all at a different angle with these tilapia. And we just realized that it wasn't going to make sense from a business standpoint. It was a lot of work. You really needed a much larger scale. We weren't really prepared, and we shut that down. We kind of shut that down and sold off all the tilapia, sold off all the equipment, all the tanks, all the, extra stuff, and was done with that. Was done with it and got rid of every single tank except for I think 1 or 2.
But I'm not done with this topic, because I'm definitely intrigued here. So let's go. Let's go back to like researching. You guys, you decide you're going to go the tilapia route. You're going to raise them sustainably, sell them for a pretty decent profit, with kind of that marketing pitch behind them. So that I completely understand. Now some research into what you're going to buy and where you're going to find it. To educate me, is there just one species of tilapia that's pretty much used as a food source?
No, there's not. There's like a blue tilapia, there's Nile tilapia. The gentleman we bought them from was, I guess somewhat of a tilapia connoisseur, and he was breeding his own strains, and you need certain permits for certain types. So, and I don't recall, it was either the blue tilapia or the Nile tilapia. There was one, we did our research, and there was one that you did not need a permit for, and that's the one that we purchased from him. Now we had looked into different species, because like literally when you get into it, you look at the different species for, okay, this one is going to grow this quick. This one is going to have this much of a fillet, almost like, like a product, looking at it from like, what's the yield going to be? And some of the other species may have had a better yield, but we weren't ready to necessarily like invest in permits and that kind of situation yet.
Okay. And so if you don't mind me asking, what did the breeding pair run you guys? Like, what was the ballpark cost?
It was a few $100. It was like $250, I think, $250 or $300. and that was for, I want to say 7 fish, one male and a bunch of females. And I don't know what the going market rate is really. I don't know how much research we did. I don't know if he was the only guy in town. I mean, it's not like you can just kind of go anywhere and buy a bunch of tilapia.
Yeah,
but,
sure.
I mean, they were what he said they were, and them breeding wasn't an issue. I mean, they were definitely sexually mature tilapia of, one male and 5 or 6 females, whatever it was. And he shared with us a lot of information. Yeah, I mean but yeah, it was a few $100.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating, and that actually that seems in line with what I would expect the cost to be, if not maybe a little bit lower than I thought you might have said. Now, as far as their reproduction, completely ignorant on this. So these tilapia, mouth brooders, egg scatterers, like what are they? What's their mode of reproduction?
Yep, they are mouth brooders. So essentially, I had them in a 55-gallon tank. There were 2 flower pots, as well as this kind of pyramid that I constructed out of some fairly large PVC tubes. So that allowed the male to corner the females in one of the flower pots, where she would drop the eggs, he would fertilize them, he would pick them back, or she would pick them back up, and then she could kind of stake out one of those pyramid tubes, one of the tubes in the pyramid, to kind of, go on her own and kind of hide away from the male. And then once we noticed a holding female, we would go and take her out and put her in a 20-gallon tank until the fry were, free swimming. She would spit the fry, or we would, have her spit the fry, and we would put her back in with the male. But that only lasted a few weeks before we literally took the male out of the tank, because we just had too many fry. Each batch was, anywhere from a few dozen to 100 fry easy.
Wow!
And so it got out of hand quick.
And what's ballpark? What's the size of these tilapia? I'm trying to picture are they like smaller than dinner plate size? Or are they kind of?
Oh yeah. The breeders were about no bigger than like 6 inches, I'd say. I mean that would be tops. I'd say 4 to 6 inches. The breeders were. These were not huge fish. These fish, if you saw them, they were not like harvesting size fish. I think this species of tilapia can get to like 4 or 5 plus pounds. Sometimes people will even wait that long to harvest them. But these fish were, still, juveniles for sure.
Interesting. And then as you guys were kind of getting a feel for once you had a female holding, so they're maternal mouth brooders, and you said you did a combination of, you would let the female spit the fry on her own once they were, old enough, or you would strip the fry, or would you strip the eggs?
No, we never stripped the eggs with them. Normally what would happen is I would see we put the female in the tank while she was still holding eggs. Then we would notice that the fry had become free swimming, but they would still kind of hang out in her mouth a lot. And when they got to the point where we would notice the fry were free swimming, but when we went over towards the tank or they got scared, they would kind of go in her mouth. Then at that point, we would try to get her out. So normally what would happen is we go over to the tank, we would capture her, but some of the fry would swim back into her mouth. So we would kind of put her in another container and kind of try to hold her and coax her to spit the rest of the fry out. But we always waited until they were free swimming. I never had an issue with the females eating the fry. I'm not saying that couldn't happen, but I didn't see it, and we had so many that if they were predating, it didn't affect the yield.
Okay, Ryan, so walk me through how many tanks did you have for this operation, and what kind of filtration were you using, what kind of lighting? Like, I guess paint a more descriptive picture of this kind of operation.
Yeah, so in my garage, the main grow out tanks, the big tanks, were IBC totes. So they're usually used in their landscaping. They hold chemicals. But they are about 275, 300-gallon totes, like a plastic tote wrapped around with this metal kind of encasing. So we had 4 of those where we had chopped off the top and created these DIY 5-gallon bucket filters. So we had pumps running from the bottom of these totes through bucket filters with DIY spray bars just filled with, different size media. And then I was doing water changes on these tubs, these totes, a few times a week as well. And then the other part of the operation was the 55-gallon tank with the breeding pair. And then we had, I don't know, about 6 or 8 10 and 20-gallon tanks for the the holding females. And eventually when we put the male in a separate tank as well, because we just wanted to stop production.
Gotcha. And so how long did this go on for before you guys decided to pull the plug? And did you ever actually take anything to market?
Yeah, so this went on for maybe like 5-6 months, and we never took anything to market. We ended up selling some to some individuals who wanted them for their pond. So not as food fish, but more as like stocking fish for someone's pond. Mm-hmm. We just unloaded them, obviously a lot less than what we had, wanted, but we didn't take a bath. We didn't invest too much because those tanks and those totes and the lights for that stuff we had bought used. We just found some just standard lighting, used aquarium lighting that we stretched over these tubs. It wasn't anything fancy or special. We didn't have any live plants or anything. I just wanted, some lights just because I didn't even know, at the time. I just, we need lights. So we just bought some cheap used lights.
Okay. And then, I mean, did you end up having like a bunch left over that you just had to get rid of? Or did you have like a giant like fish taco cook-off?
Yeah, we ended up selling all of them. None of them, to my knowledge, were eaten. So we ended up selling off all the fingerlings and stuff like that, and the breeding pairs and everything to a few different individuals that had ponds. And like the last couple, they were just more of like hey, we want to free them in our pond. We want them to be, just set them free type deal. And we let them know we were kind of, closing down operations. So they were happy just to we made a deal. I forget what it was. We made a deal and they just bought all the last fish. They're like, listen, we just want to put them in our private pond. We want to give them a good home. That's what we're looking to do. And we made a deal with them and gave them all the rest of the fingerlings at that point. They were, probably between 3-4 inches long, I guess. Probably more closer to 3 inches long.
Nice. Now I'm going to say this. I think it is awesome that you guys did this. I think it's super cool, and I'm sure it has set the stage for how your fish career, if you will, has progressed from there. But was there a moment where you two just like kind of sat down after it was all said and done with a beer, and you guys were like, "What the heck were we thinking?"
Oh yeah, there was definitely times like that, just like crazy stuff, but. Him and I have had other crazy business ideas not related to fish and stuff that we've played around with. So that's kind of been our shtick, over the years. Like I said, this is my friend since like 7th grade. But we definitely look back and go, that was kind of stupid and goofy. And
I love it.
I don't think we regret it. It's just one of those things that was just, we laugh about it now for sure.
Nah,
it's
dude,
crazy.
That's so good, man. So like whenever you decide to do the fish club tour or the fish club speaking circuit, right? Like that's got to be, a part of your presentation is showing the pictures and talking about this experience of setting up an at-home in the garage tilapia foodstuffs farm, if you will. Like that's cool.
Yeah, no, it was a fun. I did kind of recount the story a little bit in a video, but it's definitely it was a learning experience. A lot of the things that I did learn, I directly use, in my fish room today. So it was cool, and it was cool to go through that with my buddy who's not into fish at all right now. But it was just a really cool experience.
And then let's go ahead and make that segue into your fish room as we know it now. So then, how did that start up?
Yeah, so even after I got rid of the tilapia and that was over, like I said, pretty much all that stuff was sold, on Craigslist, the fish, the tanks. I think the IBC toast just went to the dump. But I was left with just a few tanks in the garage. And for less than a year, close to a year, but less than a year, I went with, no tank setup of anything. And it was December of 2016. I still had this itch to set up a tank because I'd never set up that saltwater tank, that 55-gallon tank in the living room. And I didn't want to go full-blown saltwater, but I still had this itch. And my wife bought me, it was like kind of a Christmas present for December of 2016, bought me a 55-gallon off of Craigslist. And that kind of rehatched me into the hobby full-blown because that was a tank that had live plants. It had some angelfish. It's what led me into discovering kind of YouTube and, the nitrogen cycle and how live plants could be beneficial. And, now, my fish room, I have like almost 30 tanks, I think. But from there, it was just, cherry shrimp and plecos and different substrates and just learning. I just became like a sponge, wanting to learn, as much as I could.
And does she regret buying you that tank, or is she happy with your newfound addiction?
I don't think so. I think she's happy with it. She's happy that, that I'm happy. So, I don't think she regrets it at all. Fish is definitely not her thing, although she does kind of do some stuff for me. She gets involved a little bit, with the fish and, especially the babies and stuff like that. But yeah, it's definitely something we get into.
Well, the nice thing too for her, I would imagine, is that you've done it very tastefully in the house, right? So you've got that one tank, which is now the African cichlid tank, right? The Mabuna tank.
Correct.
Which is a real fun tank. I mean, you just sit back and watch that tank do its thing, and it's just really peaceful. Really, well, sometimes it can be chaotic in there, right? Because they're African cichlids, but it's peaceful for you, right? Just to kind of sit back and watch the fish interact. And then in your other room, you've got a I know there's plecos in there. Are there guppies in that tank as well? But another heavily...
There's cherry shrimp. There's cherry shrimp, and then the plecos and some plants and stuff.
Okay, but it is a heavily planted, very peaceful tank. So, and those are the only two that are actually in the house, right? Everything else is in the garage, so it's kind of, it's controlled, it's out of sight, and, you've got two nice display tanks.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, so I do have only the two in the house, and that's the max. I'm not planning any more in the house right now. And then, I got a bunch in the garage. But it worked out that way. And she was around when I had the whole tilapia, debacle, and she was around for that. So she knows me. So so the fact that the garage is now transformed into something else is not that out of the norm.
So then, as you start building out your garage and you start adding fish tanks, is it primarily cherry shrimp? That's kind of your thing, or have you gone through different, different? I don't want to call it a fad, but different interests, right? Like, South American cichlids or African cichlids. Like, have you kind of gone through an evolution in what you prefer to keep?
Yeah, I think I don't know if I've gone through the evolution yet. I think I will, but I think my main goal starting off was, what can I be successful with? Here in Florida, I have fairly hard water, so African cichlids was one where I was like, okay, we can do some African cichlids. Cherry shrimp was another one where I was like, okay, cherry shrimp makes sense, especially the caridina versus the neos, versus the other ones. I haven't tried any of that because I don't have the soft water. And the same can be said about some of the other species I keep. I'm trying to just make it easy on myself right now. I do have some South American cichlids, and I do see myself in the future kind of, maybe playing around with an RO system and playing around with some more, softer water species, and maybe going, like you said, through those bigger transitions, because there's definitely some species that interest me, from different like the bigger cichlids and stuff like that I don't have right now that I'd like to in the future.
I may put you on the spot with this question, but to the best of your knowledge, you're talking about Florida in your Orlando area having harder water. What is your water source? Because I would just assume that you guys get a lot of rain like we do. You've got bodies of water everywhere, to which a California person, I think that there's alligators in every single body of water that I drive past, which I don't think is an unreasonable thought. But have you researched where your water is coming from?
I haven't, and I'm not sure if this has anything to do with it, but I know I'm not on well. So my water, it comes from the municipality. But even that being said, I'm not sure. And I would believe that if it is groundwater at some point, the ground here in Florida is pretty much limestone.
Right.
So I would assume that maybe that has something to do with, the hardness. If this water is, coming through, what's the term? I'm going to sound like I'm a league here, but the aquifer, is that the term? Like under the ground, whatever. Maybe it's
aquifer. Yeah.
Aquifer. Maybe it's picking up, some of the calcium and limestone sediment, and that's what makes our water more hard here in Florida. But I don't know. I do know that I do have some harder water, and I think it's for the most part, pretty much everyone in Florida, it's, fairly hard water out here.
Yeah, that just seems reasonable, but just initially, I would think that with again the amount of perspiration that you guys get, precipitation, not perspiration. What the heck is wrong with me?
There's plenty
I'll leave that in.
There's plenty of that going around too. There's plenty of that going around too.
With the amount of precipitation that you guys get, that maybe that would contribute to your municipal water supply. But if you guys have a lot of limestone and it is a groundwater source, and the fact that you're saying that you do have hard water, and I did taste the water out of the tap while I was in Orlando, and it certainly does not taste like the soft water here in Seattle. I can tell you that much.
Oh. It's funky, man. It's funky. It can be funky.
It is, man. I'm gonna tell the rest of the country that the Pacific Northwest, the Seattle area, man, we've got the best tap water. It tastes like you're drinking bottled water. It is just so nice. So I struggle when I travel elsewhere. But I digress. So let's talk about now. Collecting in the wild. So when did you first do your first collecting trip out in the wild of Florida?
My first ever collecting trip would have been at the end of last year. I think like October or so of 2018. And that was because of, local fish friends, some friends that I met online, buying and selling and trading, tanks and plants and stuff. My one friend in particular, Jose, was kind of always intrigued by like kind of the smaller fish, the fish that, the native stuff, not necessarily the prettiest fish, but just kind of like the interesting stuff. More the live bears especially, and we just kind of were talking, and there's a group of 4 or 5 of us went out, found a spot, and went and collected. I don't even know to this day, I don't know what they were, but I just know I had a blast. Got my feet wet walking through this river, and just collected a bunch of, I think they were like shiner type fish, and it was awesome.
Did you see any gators?
No gators. I've never seen any gators while collecting. But I mean, it is smart to kind of approach it from a standpoint of you do never know. When they do see gators here in any, usually if there's a gator, as soon as it gets spotted, someone says something and they remove it. So if there's a gator in a residential area or an area where there's going to be people, they remove it. Even an area where I would go collecting, most of the times it's, they should be removed. But you could be the one that, it just came there yesterday and it hasn't been removed yet.
And so what are your, do you have any like a real crazy story that's happened so far while you've been out collecting?
No, not really. I mean, everybody kind of curious because, sometimes we're out and there's no one else around, but there's a few times where I've been collecting where there's, a few other people doing some other fishing or something else. And they're always just curious as to what the heck, we're doing, and are we catching bait? What are you doing? You're collecting stuff? Are you from a university? Oh no, you're just like fish geeks with aquariums. Like, yeah, that's pretty much it. But people have been really friendly. We haven't got run out of anywhere. People are usually kind of curious. If we do run into people, in terms of like running into predators or anything, no. I think the leeches getting on us. You were with us. It was when I was with you and Corey. We got leeches on us. That was fun / a little scary.
Well, that's pretty good so far. Then, if that's like the craziest thing that's happened, I guess that just means that it's been good times catching fish then, and nothing too out of the ordinary has happened. But yeah, that was. We were out there having a good old time in that lake, kind of where in the reeds, if you will, right off the shore of this lake, and we're catching various water bugs, and is that a stick bug or is it a water scorpion? We didn't really know, but certainly don't want to find out and get stung or bit by it or whatever it does. And me just kind of playing around with swirling my net around and pulling up a handful of fry. That was pretty wild, because we were all assuming that they were going to be like under the boat or in the taller grass, and I'm just out in the very middle, just like a little kid. It's like when you watch little kids play baseball, and there's that one kid out in right field, and he's just kind of like looking around, throwing his mitt up in the air. Like, honestly, that's kind of what I felt like I was doing. I just had my net in the water, just kind of do and pull it up, and sure enough, there's a handful of fish, and a handful of fry, and it was just really cool.
Yeah, no, it was pretty neat, and I have the photo to prove it. You sent the photo to me. That was pretty cool. I appreciate you for that. But no, that was, you didn't think it. I mean, the look on your face, it was kind of an amazement of just like this random scoop, and you came up with jackpot. Yeah,
no, that was great, and that whole day, that was my very first time ever collecting fish, as in I'm going to get in the water with a net to try to catch fish, as opposed to, rod and reel fishing. So that was just an absolute blast that day. So why don't you walk us through what species we were targeting and what did we see out there fish wise?
Yeah, so we were after a few different things, but we caught a lot of least killifish, which is like the smallest livebearer in the world, which is a really cool looking fish, super tiny, like inch or less. Also some sailfin mollies. Those are the ones that you and I were kind of walking up and down in the mud, looking at these males have this kind of flashy blue tail in the water. You can spot them. And we caught a few, but we were walking up and down the bank there trying to corral them. That was a lot of fun. And then also the bluefin killifish, which I think right now in terms of fish that I've collected and native fish, probably I have some right now. I'm hoping to breed them. I'm keeping a colony that I've collected in the fish room, and they just have this really kind of flashy blue and red fins, and it's something that I would never have believed that it's a native fish here to Florida and the whole Southeast. It's really cool.
Yeah, so you and Corey were both very excited about that fish, and I was looking at it in your tank, and I was like, yeah, I guess that's kind of all right. And I've since gone back and watched the fish room tour, and he actually caught it on video when the fish does flash, right? I guess I just must have been absorbed with the South America, with your big, was he South or Central American cichlid that you have in the big tank?
Yeah.
And just kind of, checking everything out in your room and not really focusing on anything in particular. But yeah, that killifish, when they actually flash out their fins, it is just vibrant blue. It's beautiful, and then they tuck them back in, and then they just kind of look like a less flashy white cloud or kind of an equus pencil fish. Like they've got very similar patterns to me, but far more active, and with that flashy the flashy tails when they do show it, they are a very beautiful fish.
Yeah, definitely, and they are really active. That's one thing my local friend David had kept them in the past, and he said, "Listen, man. Once these things get acclimated in a day or two in your tank, they should be, right out there and really friendly." And they have been. I mean, I come up there and they're like in your face. They're not too shy. They adapted really well. It's a pretty established, really planted tank, which is, their preferred habitat. But, they get adjusted pretty well.
Mm-hmm. And then the fourth species that we were catching was the gambusia, so the mosquito fish. And is that actually truly native to Florida, or is that just invasive?
You know what? I'm not sure if that is native or invasive. I do know that they will kind of go ahead and introduce them. And I believe you can literally call up like a local municipality, or I don't know exactly the department, but they will give you some, like say you have a lake or an area or just a small body of water that you want to make sure, mosquitoes aren't breeding in. They'll literally give you some so you can make sure you put them in that water so you don't have that issue anymore.
Wow, that's crazy. I didn't know that they were doing that. I mean, it makes total sense. Now, I do know in Tennessee, so I've talked about this fish before, the Barron's top minnow, the Fungulisa julicii, I believe it is, very beautiful, fairly large killifish, actually native to this central plateau region of Tennessee, and it's actually facing some extinction potentially, or like vulnerable, threatened status on the on the endangered species list. Like my brain's just completely farting. Like
okay.
It actually hasn't it hasn't made it on for the Endangered Species Act yet. But they're saying that introduced gambusia is out competing it like super hard for food.
Oh wow!
In between that and like encroachment, like human encroachment on their native waters. So I know that's somewhere where the gambusia is doing a bit of damage, and I think elsewhere, like I would have to assume everywhere else where it's been introduced, right? Like putting it in old pools to make sure that the stagnant water in a pool doesn't breed mosquitoes, like all these vector control activities to keep mosquitoes down. And if they ever get out in the wild, they're fairly prolific at breeding, and they just, for a little fish, the thing can outcompete natives.
Yeah, and the impact can be just devastating. Yeah, and it's a good point you bring up, the negative effects, because it is really cool to get out there. And when we were collecting, I don't think we really came across, like I said, I'm pretty sure the gambusia are native here, but regardless, other than that, we didn't come across any invasive species, especially when you think of Florida especially South Florida, you think of some of the, like, the bigger cichlids that people have released into the wild. My friends and I went collecting a week or two ago, and for the first time ever, I ended up catching some of the more invasive species that you think about having a negative impact, like a convict cichlid. I went to this stream river area, and we were catching convict cichlids and platies, and no gambusia, no least keelyfish, no bluefin keelyfish, none of the natives, what you'd expect to find there, but instead literally aquarium fish that you'd have to believe, whether it was, a few months ago or years ago, hobbyists released, into the wild and now have taken over.
Wow. And how far away from where we were collecting were you getting the convict cichlids?
Different water system, but with, 20, 30 minutes away.
Oh, wow. Now, given that these were, introduced or invasive convict cichlids in this body of water, but I would imagine being out in the wild, though, that they had some probably pretty vibrant colors, yeah?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's the thing. They were beautiful looking fish, and you could see, different generations clearly populating. That's why I say I think, they've probably been there for a while. They seem to have established themselves, different, larger, smaller, male, female. But, yeah, I mean, beautiful looking fish.
Mm-hmm. And so I did a quick little Wikipedia. So, for what it's worth here, there's apparently the western mosquito fish and the eastern mosquito fish. They're both in the Gambusia genus. The western mosquito fish is Gambusia affinis, and the eastern is Gambusia holbrooki. So I'm wondering, so it would make sense then that you guys would have potentially the eastern mosquito fish, I would assume. And I'm looking for if it says anything about it being native to Florida, but no, definitely. So there's at least a western and an eastern mosquito fish that's native to the United States. And they say, they don't actually harm any of the fish, but they do have aggressive behavior, and they do outcompete them for food.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, just because they're not going around eating other fish, it would make sense where they're, taking up, like you said, food resources and starving, because they're definitely out there in numbers, that's for sure.
Yeah, and if they reproduce faster, right? Like if they're eating more, they're reproducing more, and there's just more of them to do that, and it just is potentially could spiral out of control, I would imagine.
Yeah, it throws off the balance of the whole local ecosystem.
Yep. And so what other kind of wild collecting plans in Florida do you have?
So I would really like to get out a little further south, and there's people that collect, like I said, like you can collect frontosa, peacock bass, knifefish. So I'm interested in maybe collecting some of the bigger stuff, just seeing what's out there. I used to do some rod and reel fishing. I don't know if I'll be doing that, but I am interested in really kind of, collecting, many species as I can, legally, of course, and see if I can keep, a lot of them here in the fish room, and, kind of educate. There's been times in the past, I kind of alluded to, I don't know if you want to get into it, but I alluded to, there's been times in the past where, I got a slap on the wrist for not necessarily following the rules. And obviously a lot of these fish are out here now in the wild because of people not following the rules. I think it's important that, we educate and we learn and we explain to people why the native fish can be so cool and an invasive fish, can be, devastating, even though they may look cool as well.
Yeah, so you actually just reminded me of that. Why don't you go ahead and develop that out, the slap on the wrist that you got, and kind of let us unpack that and let us understand what happened.
Yeah. So this happened a few months back at the end of 2018. This kind of ties back into the whole breeding fish for profit. I had mentioned earlier that I've, bred and sold some cherry shrimp, like a lot of hobbyists have, to make a few bucks, pay for fish food. I've done the same thing with bristlenose plecos. And I had a pair of albino bristlenose plecos that I was looking to move on from, and I listed them on Craigslist. And I got a, response from a gentleman, set up a time to meet on Friday. And, gentleman came, looked at the plecos, asked a few questions, looked around the fish room, asked about the larger common pleco I have in my 125. I had explained to him, this is a common pleco, not like the bristlenose plecos you're buying. These guys get monstrous. You don't want to really have one probably. And if it does get out of hand, some people are knuckleheads and they release them into the wild like they shouldn't. And just kind of giving a little, PSA, which would come to kind of really help me out because I can't prove this. They didn't really kind of admit this. But long story short, I get some cash for the plecos. As this is happening, a marked Florida Fish and Wildlife truck comes around. Two very nice officers come and approach me, ask me what's going on, ask me what I'm doing selling the fish. It's illegal to sell aquarium fish, even for, $20-$30 out of your garage, out of your home, unless you have some permitting, which I did not have. I do now have, and I have a bunch of permits more than I need. And the cool thing is they're fairly cheap permits, which they explained to me, hey, you knucklehead, get these permits. You can't be doing this. But long story short, it was definitely a big wake-up experience, definitely something that I want to, share, and I think people can learn from, and you should definitely be looking up your laws and regulations in your area before you're buying anything, selling anything, collecting anything. We've been talking a lot about going and collecting and keeping stuff. You definitely want to make sure you reach out to all the, proper authorities and get your ducks in a row, because I was lucky that I got a slap on the wrist. But they had every right to fine me. I think it was a misdemeanor. I forget what the fines were, at least a few $100, but they had every right to fine me. I was in the wrong. I was just lucky that I got off with a warning that day.
No, that's great. And I mean, Florida is unique with that tropical climate there, that pretty much any exotic creature that comes from anywhere near the equator can pretty much survive in Florida. The Burmese pythons, the iguanas, like there's just countless creatures that have just overrun Florida. Like the python thing is super scary. Like, I talk about the alligators, but man, those things that are taking down alligators and I just have no natural predators, man, those things are no joke. And so I say all that because Florida has to be extra on guard, and it should really be on guard. And as stewards of this hobby, we should be doing PSAs. We should be making these public service announcements to let people know that they need to not act like knuckleheads, because those actions, if it's just one person, whatever, but if it's just multiple people, and no, it's not just whatever for one person, but the more that do it, the more compounded it gets, the more visibility, the more negative press, and then we're going to get legislation that potentially comes down and hammers hard on the hobby, and now we can't enjoy this awesome hobby that we all love.
Yeah, I agree. I think a conversation needs to be said, and I think you're right. We got to spread the word. This is something we didn't even talk about. This is something I just recorded a video on today, and it'll probably be out before this podcast comes out. But there was an arrest made in North Carolina due to cruelty to animals. A gentleman was evicted from his house, left an Oscar fish in his 55-gallon tank, left his Oscar fish in a tank. It had a hole in the head. The sheriff's deputy saw it. They arrested the gentleman and charged him with cruelty to animals. Now, he was since charges were dropped, and I guess the laws and the books there don't support fish, so they had to drop the charges. However, for a certain point of time, they did arrest him. They arrested him. He had to bail himself out, and this is because of an Oscar fish that he had left in a tank. So I think more stuff like that needs to happen. I think we need to talk about it more and really just have those conversations.
Interesting. So the sheriff, they arrested him because so what was the story? Why was that? He had gotten arrested prior, and so he wasn't able to care for the Oscar?
No. There's a few different things going on. So he was evicted from his home.
That's right.
He was evicted from his home, which obviously if you get evicted, the timeline's kind of unclear. I think it was only a few days, but he was evicted from his home, and then 3 days later, the sheriff's deputies found this fish in poor conditions. They reported it. He ended up being arrested, but then, he bailed out. But then the prosecutor dropped the charges when they realized that the laws and the books did not support fish. So I don't know if they extended to dogs, cats, birds, horses, whatever. But I don't know where the line was drawn. But the fish was not included in the law on the books in North Carolina, at least. So. I did some research digging around trying to see how that works here in Central Florida, and kind of got directed back towards Fish and Wildlife. I reached out to them again. I haven't heard back yet. But just I want to find answers. I'm just curious to see where we stand with that. in terms of legalities for Florida.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting. And so while you're out collecting in the wild, what are the rules around when you actually do net an invasive species?
Yeah, so when you net an invasive species, you're supposed to, essentially dispatch of that species. I mean, I don't think there are any laws against necessarily keeping it, but you're not supposed to reintroduce that species, to the wild. I think they whether you have a license to do something or not, you're supposed to, dispatch or kill that, particular animal, which I know is difficult and a lot of people wouldn't agree with it. But, to my knowledge, that is the law. That's how you're supposed to act.
Okay. So, but like you were saying though, you could potentially bring these frontosas or convict cichlids home and legally be able to keep them in your possession
with the proper licensure. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, with the proper licensure. Yes.
And that's not the same license to sell them. That's the license that permitted you to go and collect initially.
There's multiple licenses, yeah. So there's like the only license that I needed to sell that pleco, like in order to collect, essentially, you just need like a Florida fishing license. I went ahead and bought a commercial one. That way I can actually sell stuff as well, like collect plants and sell them as well, like sell the wild caught stuff. In terms of being able to sell those plecos that I had bred, I needed what they call a freshwater fish and frog dealer's license, which is less than $50 for the year. So it's not like a ton of money.
So what about the cherry shrimp though? Would you have been off the hook if you were just selling cherry shrimp?
No, I believe the cherry shrimp would fall under the plecos as well. I think it's just for whatever reason the pleco is what got me. The pleco is what they saw. Maybe it was a dollar amount because the cherry shrimp are a few bucks a piece. The plecos were, I think, somewhere in the range of like $30-$40. So maybe because of that, I know I'm not really sure because when I asked the two gentlemen that were uniformed, and I was like, oh man, so this is kind of like an undercover sting type deal where those two guys were, undercover cops, and this, and he was like, oh no, we were just driving in your neighborhood, which, I respect him. I know it's not true. I know he wasn't. I know he doesn't expect me to believe that he was just happened to be driving in my residential neighborhood at the exact same time I happen to be selling these fish, and we got you. Oh, okay, But I understand. Like he just, they can't give all their stuff away. He knows I'm not stupid, but. I couldn't ask too many questions because we were under the guise of, we just kind of got you.
Yeah, no, that's crazy. Well, Ryan, man, I hope that sometime in the near future I can make it back down to Florida and collect with you. But before we leave, man, I know that people listening to this are like, man, this Ryan guy, it sounds like he's doing some cool stuff. I want to know more about him. I want to see if I can follow some of his social media. So why don't you go ahead and let us know, what social media do you have? And in the bio, I did talk about the YouTube. So why don't you go ahead and kind of build out and talk about your YouTube channel for a little bit?
Yeah, man. So you can find me on YouTube. That's pretty much my main social media. I try to put out, a few videos a week. And what I really focus on is DIY fish projects, doing things cheap. My fish room is in the garage, so I battle some, heat issues, some cold issues, even though I'm here in Florida. I'm really focusing on these collecting trips and getting out, getting my feet wet, going to collect, native species, invasive species, and seeing what's out there. There's a lot that I just don't know much about. I'm still really new to fish keeping as a hobby. I know there's guys that have been in it for 40, 50 years and are still learning. I've been doing this full blown with multiple tanks now for, 2.5 years almost. So I'm still very much a novice, and a lot of my YouTube channel is centered around, like I said, what I'm kind of doing, but also I like to share through the eyes of some other individuals. So I've taken some tours of farms to kind of share with you guys what's going on at different farms or stores or just breeding facilities. Because like I said, I don't consider myself an expert really. So I like to, bring on some people that have been more of an expert in their field, like discus or loaches or whatever, and have them, share that. And then I also will share some of my techniques in terms of building a fish room on the cheap. If there's one thing I do think I kind of like specialize in or really think I have some knowledge in, it's the whole, Craigslist offer up, buying things used and finding good deals. And I got a lot of good videos on that. But I'm really excited in the future to kind of, expand the fish room and bring some stuff that you just don't see out there too much. I also have a Instagram page. It's Lucky Schmucks Fish Cave on Instagram, where I try to post something cool, do some behind the scenes stuff. Trying to work on my fish photography a little bit, step up the game there. But you can find me, like I said, Instagram and YouTube, just Lucky Schmucks Fish Cave.
And I'll make sure that I have those links in the show notes so people can just direct link directly to your Instagram page or Facebook or your YouTube page or your YouTube channel so people can follow you and subscribe to your stuff because, you're an awesome guy. Like I said, I now feel like I can say, yeah, man, I've got a buddy in Florida. Yeah, I just went collecting with my friend in Florida the other month. So, I'm really glad that we had a chance to connect in person. And I think the funny thing for people is as they watch your channel, when you're doing your behind the chair, and, kind of monologue session, or you're just talking to the camera with your fish tanks in the background, I didn't realize that you're going to be like 8 feet tall. Because that chair is like one of the low boy Adirondack style chairs, and so you it seems like you're at a normal height, but like you meet you in person, it's like, man, Ryan's like 10 feet tall, man. This dude's super tall.
I like to tell people I'm 5'19", 5'19".
There you go.
So you can do the math. But,
man.
But yeah, no, I have a lot of fun doing it, man. It's been a lot of fun, doing the channel, and meeting you was a blast. Like I said, I had fun. I hope that, I make it out to Washington, to the store, come meet you again one day. I want to be doing more traveling because I think that, it's another thing in this hobby that, there's a lot of things to see across the country, across the globe. So I'm hoping that this kind of opens up some more traveling doors, and it'd be really cool if it brought, our paths to cross again in person.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I have no doubt that they will, and I can't wait for that to happen again. We'll go out, get some more good food, and do some fish nerd stuff.
Definitely, man. Looking forward to it. Yeah, I'm excited to see what kind of cool stuff you guys got out there in Washington in terms of food and stuff. Good places like that.
No, there's definitely some good places to eat here, man. We'll definitely take you out. All right, Ryan. Well, thank you so much, man, for taking time out of your evening to talk to me on the podcast. It's been an absolute blast. Like I said, I feel like I've got a great friend in Florida, so thank you so much for coming on. And I hope everybody, jumps over to your Instagram, jumps over to your YouTube, and checks it out and subscribes and follows you.
Hey, thanks, Randy. It was a great time, and I really appreciate you having me on.